Well, hi again. I know it's been a while, but yeah, I took a little bit of a hiatus for a couple months, but trust me, I was still doing things on the side. I wasn't completely off the grid. Yeah, basically just starting a new job and everything like that. It was just getting a little chaotic, but things have calmed down finally. And because of that, I'm like, you know what? I can finally start making some videos again. If you have been following me on Facebook and even on YouTube a little bit, you have been noticing that I've been focusing a lot lately on revamping some of my old libraries. So the TD Ameritrade one, that was a big one. Recently just posted about interactive brokers. I'm working on that one. The Python SEC library. And I even released a few new libraries during this period as well. One of those libraries we're going to be covering in today's series. But also, what else have I done? The Federal Reserve API. So I did that one if you're interested in that. There is a Treasury one. That one's still very, very early. So I would say don't look at that one yet because there's really nothing you can do with it. But I have started working on that. And then the one that, like I said, we're going to be covering today, the Power BI library. That's a really popular one as well. And even some of the Microsoft Graph API as well. That one is huge. It's absolutely huge. But there's been a lot going on. So hopefully you've been staying up to date either with my GitHub or my Facebook, just because I have been posting there a lot, just saying kind of, hey, what's going on? What's new? And stuff like that. But yes, I'm back. I'm making some videos again. Really excited. I miss doing this. I really do like making videos. And I really do like writing these libraries. They're really fun. And this particular library that we're going to be covering today, this has been really cool to write. I love Power BI. I think it's such a cool application. And really, this is I would say one of the really good examples of showing kind of how people who have been contributing to the channel have really made this particular series possible, because anybody who uses Power BI knows that there is a license fee associated with it. And so that was something that I have been taking some of the Patreon donations and some of the GitHub sponsor donations, and I created a business account for Microsoft so that way we could start exploring some of these services, just because I think it's really useful in your daily work, and also just getting familiar with just the tools and how they interact with each other. So this is going to be the start of a lot of cool things. I'm hoping to do SharePoint next. That's my next big one. But yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. Is I'm going to be showing you how to interact with the Power BI REST API. And then for those of you who are interested, I am working on the trading system one. So here is the repo for everybody, just so you can see it. There's a lot to it, obviously. So it's coming. It's just a lot of time, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of exploring and stuff like that. Okay, so let's get started. What is Power BI, right? What is this wonderful product? Well, it is a business intelligence tool that was developed by Microsoft. A lot of people think this was in response to Tableau, which is another business intelligence tool. And really with these particular tools, it's all about dashboarding. So it's about building very pretty dashboards to help I would say summarize and communicate findings in your data. And this has been a really popular tool that has just grown in popularity over the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years. I don't know if that's really the best way to put it. I personally started using Power BI, I would say, in 2016, and it's changed a heck of a lot since then. So they are constantly adding to this particular service. They are constantly enhancing it, giving you new visuals, giving you new capabilities, different types of connectors, all sorts of really good stuff. Doesn't mean it's perfect, doesn't mean there's not, I would say, limitations to it, but I constantly keep up to date with this, and you will find right away that they are pushing out changes all the time because they want this to be competitive. They want this to be something that can compete with Tableau. Now, with Power BI, there's different versions of it. So there is a web-based application. So that is the Power BI web. And it looks pretty familiar with the regular desktop application. So there is a desktop application that you can install on your systems. This is the web-based version, and you can kind of see here, it's organized into different categories. So you have data sets, applications, deployment pipelines. You can create new reports, new data flows, new data sets, new dashboards, lots of good stuff. And then normally with your Power BI account, there is a free account for personal users, I believe, or I think maybe it still might be something where you have to do a business account. I think with the free one, you can do a personal account and I think you'll be fine, but they're really limited on the capability. So you can't do a ton with it. And then you have your business one. So then there is a license fee that goes with your business one. And then you have a premium per user license. So the premium one, that's actually the one that I'm on right now, gives you access to more functionality. So there's premium storage accounts, you can do more complex things, and you can have more functionality like exporting reports and all sorts of different stuff that kind of goes along with what you would imagine to be a premium account. But that's kind of, I would say, Power BI in a snapshot. It's, again, really heavily used to build dashboards. It also has Power Query built inside of it. So Power Query allows you to connect to lots of different data sources and then do transformations on those data sets. So you can take a JSON file and then maybe merge it with a SQL table and really build some pretty complex data sets that you can then use inside of your visualizations. And there is also Power Pivot that is built into it. So that one allows you to do some data modeling using your data sets. So where you can more efficiently join tables, build relationships, and even define hierarchies that you can leverage inside of your dashboard. So it allows you to do things like drill down into very fine details and see things along like certain time horizons and stuff like that. So lots of different tools have been integrated into Power BI. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's become so popular over the last couple of years. Okay, so that's Power BI. What are we going to do next? Well, next, I'm going to show you how to get registered with the REST API. So the REST API is what we're going to be using to interact with the Power BI service using Python. So Power BI exposes itself through a REST API, and that REST API allows you to do things like create new dashboards. It allows you to create new things like data flows, data sets. Here is the documentation. I will be putting this in the README for those of you who are interested in the GitHub repo. But yeah, there's lots of different services and resources that you can work with inside of the REST API. However, you do need to register an application that has the capability to interact and has the permissions, more specifically, to operate with your Power BI account. And with that application, you're going to be able to do things like upload data, you can build new pipelines, you can manage access to different reports, you can create new dashboards, new capacities. There's lots to it. I'm not going to cover every particular service and resource just because there's a lot, and some of these resources have many, many different operations. So for example, if you go to data sets, you'll see there's like 20 different operations. That's a lot to code. I will have it coded in at some point, but there's just a lot to it, and I can't possibly cover all of it just because some of it is very rarely used, I would say, by the broad base of users, if I had to put it like that. But yeah, so we're not going to cover every resource, but we will cover some of the more popular ones, and we'll talk about kind of when you might want to do certain things and when you might want to work with a particular type of resource. So again, that's kind of just a high level overview about what we're planning to do when it comes from covering different resources. Now, if you are somebody who likes to take my repos and then modify them yourself, just so you are aware, you would want to go to the Power BI Python API repo that I have. So this one is the most up-to-date one. I am making changes to it all the time still, so just be aware of that. I am adding in new endpoints, and I am adding in new documentation and new examples as needed, so just be aware of that. But hopefully it's pretty straightforward in how to use it. I try to document it as much as I can, and I try to make sure it's very easy to follow with samples and all that kind of fun stuff. But it will give you an overview of how to install the library if you are planning to modify it yourself. If you're like the people probably in this video and you're going to just install it from PyPy, it also goes through that, and it gives you some basic usage as well in case you want to go in that particular realm. So lots of good stuff, lots of good resources that you have at your disposal. I'll be putting the links in the README, and I will also be putting the links in the video description that are relevant for this particular series. Okay, so let's do the first thing, which is we need to register an app that will have access to the REST API. Now, I'm going to be doing a couple things. if you go to dev.powerbi.com/apps, you will come to the developer app registration tool. Now, this is where you are going to register your application that will have access to your Power BI REST API. Now, there's a couple steps you need to do. You need to sign in first. So you need to sign in with the account that you want to have access to the REST API. So I have a personal account, I have a business account. I'm going to log in with my business account. And then once you do that, you need to provide a couple more pieces of information. And then once you provide it, you just click a button, and then lo and behold, you pretty much have all the information you need to get started. So this is really easy for registering an app. Sometimes the process can be a little bit more complicated with other services and other providers. So I think this one's really easy, and it kind of throws people off a little bit because you're like, seems easy. But on top of that, there's also a couple other things we're going to have to do. So we're going to have to make sure we have access to an access token and a refresh token. And that is all built into the library. I just need a couple pieces of information from the user, and then I'm able to walk you through that authentication process. So that's the one thing that is lacking from this, is they don't really explain to you how to get that access token once you have the things from this particular step. Now, I've also went through I actually found this article online, and they walk you through how to do this. I think there was one step that was slightly different, and I don't think it's going to work in our instance. Yeah, I think it's this. There's something here where he misses something, and because he doesn't provide it, it's not going to work. But this will at least walk you through, I think, getting you set up. So I will also provide this link as well, just because I think it's a pretty good article. But just keep in mind, there's one spot where he misses something. And because he misses it, you're not going to be able to actually get your access token entirely. But we'll walk through that once we get there. So let's go back and register an application. So the first thing we need to do is sign in to Power BI. So I'm going to click sign in. Okay, so that signed me in already. You might get prompted with like a separate page saying like, hey, do you want to go this account or that account or whatever it might be? Just click the account that, again, you want to have access to the Power BI REST API. More than likely, I'm not saying in all situations, it's probably going to be a business account, just because normally if you want to interact with it in Power BI in a pretty detailed fashion, it's usually through your business account. So it says I'm signed in. That's great. So I'm going to do next. And this comes the fun part. This is where you need to provide some information that will register your application with your Azure Active Directory. Now, this is something that's interesting because technically we all have an Azure Active Directory. So I don't know entirely if you technically have to sign up with Microsoft Azure. I would say you probably do, just because I would imagine some type of permission error would pop up. So I would say you probably have to have a Microsoft Azure account. In this situation, it's not going to cost you anything. So it's kind of one of those things where it's just like, just do it, just because if you're going to follow other series in my channel, you're probably going to need to have an Azure account as well. So I cover that in another video, so I'll have that link down below as well. But it's nothing super complicated. I mean, naturally, Microsoft wants to make it easy, so that way you do it. But I would say probably if some of you want to try without an Azure account, let me know and kind of give me an update, and I'd be more than happy to update the documentation. So the first thing is you're going to need to provide an application name. This is the name of the application that you'll be seeing from Microsoft Azure. So we'll call it, I don't know, Python dashboard app, something like that, right? Then you have application type. You either have for web apps and web APIs, or you have natives. So this will be apps that run on client devices such as Android, iOS, or Windows. We're going to keep it at server-side web application. Homepage URL. So we're going to be doing everything locally on our own system. So we're going to be doing HTTPS, and then it's going to be // localhost /. So we're going to be doing, again, everything locally on our own system, so we can use localhost. Obviously, if you were using the Power BI REST API in some type of production environment, this would look a little bit different. It would be pointing back to your home resource. And then from this one, I'm going to copy this wonderful URL, and then I'm going to do redirect. So this is the redirect URI. This is again used when we are going through the authentication process. Now it comes to API access. So you can be very granular here, and you can say, hey, I want this specific app to only have certain permissions. So you can say, for example, I only want this application to be able to read data sets or read reports. Or in some cases, I might want it to read and write, so create data sets as well, or read and write or create reports. And then you can also do create APIs as well. Now, if you do hover over these little information icons, they will also tell you a little bit about kind of what these permission levels mean. A lot of times you want to be granular. If you're doing some local development like I am, you kind of just do select all, but you got to keep that in mind that you're saying, hey, I want this particular app to have a lot of control over my particular service. So just be aware of that. Once you've done that, you're then going to click register. A new window is going to pop up with your application ID. This is also called your client ID. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code. I'm going to go into my configs folder. I have a file called writeconfig.py. And then I'm just going to say here, client ID, and then just put it right there. We'll be doing this a few times. We're going to also have one for our client secret. So we're going to modify this a little bit, but for right now, I just want to get this information, because if you close this window, guess what? It goes away and you're going to have to create a new client secret. You don't have to necessarily create a new application, but you will need to create a new client secret if you miss it. And then additionally, we're going to have our redirect URI. I do also need that from the user as well. But luckily, I remember what it was called. It was called localhost redirect. So super simple. From here, you can close it. If you scroll up, you will also get one last time to get it. So once you close out of this, guess what? You're gone. You're going to have to do it again. But again, they're just making sure that you copy the things. Now, just for those of you who are a little bit familiar with how it looks from the Azure Active Directory, I'm already logged into my Microsoft Azure portal. And if I go to my Azure Active Directory resource, sorry about that, I can go down to my app registrations. And then if I go to all applications, I can see my Python dashboard app. So I can see my application ID, also called client ID. And then you have the other one, which is your application secret, which is also called your client secret as well. If you do need to create a new secret, you can go over here to certificates and secrets. You can see right here, which is your secret ID. That's not your secret, but it's your secret ID. But if you need to, you can also create a new client secret as well. So just keep that in mind. If for whatever reason you lose it or something, or you think it's stale, or you think it's compromised, then you can always create a new client secret. Okay. Perfect. So now that we have that information, we are going to store it in a config file, and then we are going to run through the authentication process. Okay, we're not doing too bad, so that's good. So let's go back in our write config file. I'm going to say from config parser, import the config parser object. And then I'm going to initialize the config parser. I do this a lot in a lot of my libraries where I use a config file to store credentials. Something like this with a client ID and a client secret. This should not be public. So basically what I do after these videos is I delete them so that people can't see them and use them. But normally you would want to keep this secret. So I tend to store them in config files that aren't hosted on GitHub or anything like that. But people always ask and they say, Alex, where are you storing this stuff? And I go, it's just in a config file. You could do a text file, you could do a JSON file. I just find these ones are a little bit more organized and easier to read. We're going to add a section in the config file. So we're going to do config, add section, and then we're going to do Power BI app. Super simple. And then we're going to do config set. We're going to do the section as the Power BI app. And then we're going to have the name of the value we're going to set. In this case, it's going to be client ID. And then I'm just going to start copying and pasting, or I guess cutting and pasting to be more exact, to update some of these values. So this one will be client ID. This will be client secrets. And then this one will be redirect URI. So hopefully everyone's been having a good summer. I've been having a decent summer so far. It's been a little bit chaotic, but I guess it's better than not doing anything, right? Could always be worse. All right, so that's good. We've now set our values. Then we're gonna write them to a file. So write to a config.ini file. So I'm gonna do with open a file, and then we'll do configs, because that's the folder we're in. And then I'm gonna do config.ini. I'm gonna set the mode equal to W+, which means write to it, but if it doesn't exist, first create that file. We'll use an alias for our file handler, and then we'll do config, call that write method, the fp equals f. I don't think I can do name parameters if I remember correctly, but we'll just do that. So let's run this. Did it work? Okay, I think it worked. I didn't see it at first, so I was like, what's going on? Okay, so you can see here that we now have our section. We have the information stored in there. So guess what? We are good, and we can move on to the next portion, which is going through the authentication process. And once we're done with that, I'm gonna cut off the video, and then in the next video, we'll start talking about some resources. Okay, so I've created a new file called use Power BI. So this is where we're gonna write our script to initialize our client, and then also go through the authentication process. However, at this point, we don't have it installed. So we actually need to install the library first before we can actually start writing the code in order to go through the authentication process. So if you want, you can just do pip install Power BI Python. Sorry, Power BI Python. Is that what I called it? I can't remember what I did. Python Power BI. So I have it hosted on PyPy. So you can just go here and then just copy it like that if you want to. You can go to the README, and then the README also has it. So if you go on GitHub, you can see it there as well. But you just do Control V. It's going to go through the installation process. This pops up a little bit every once in a while. So basically, I have to fix one of the requirements in one of my files. I wrote it very hard-coded. So I said, hey, only use this one version where I wasn't being as flexible as I should. So I have one thing. So you probably will not see this error by the time this video is posted. But if some of you do, basically what's happening is if you have Microsoft something identity, it's authentication something. But anywho, this library, I use it in a different project, and it's just saying it's not compatible. So I have to like manually go back and override it because I know this one can use the later version. So I'm gonna say from prettyprint, import prettyprint. This is just using some stuff to help us read some information in a more readable fashion. We're gonna also bring in our config parser, and then from here, from Power BI.client, import Power BI client. Sometimes what happens is if I use it, then I have to reload it as well. So sometimes if you install a library, it will show up as not saying it can import it when in reality it can. It's just because it's basically didn't refresh the window. So disregard that. So we're going to do config, and then we're going to do config parser. Then we're going to do config.read, and then it's going to be the configs folder. And then I want to read that config.ini file. I'm going to store my variables in certain, or the variables from, I'm going to store information from my config file in variables. I don't know why that was so hard to say. So I'm going to do config, go into my Power BI app section, and then I'm going to do client ID. So I want my client ID, and just like the previous one, I'm going to copy and paste a couple times just to be precise. And then I'm going to do client secrets, and then I'm going to do redirect URI. Sometimes what I'll do here is just to make sure I spelled everything correctly. I'll run it again just to be safe. Okay, perfect. That's always a good sign. Alex has a tendency to misspell things, to put it nicely. Okay, we're going to now initialize the Power BI client. Okay, so we're going to do Power BI client, and then we're going to do the Power BI client. You can see here, everything's been nicely documented for all of you. You could even copy this if you wanted to, just telling you. So if you wanted to, you could save yourself some typing. But in essence, all I need from you is client ID, client secret. I'm probably going to be hard coding this. So this one I might just be removing as a variable unless I'm noticing that it's changing. But basically, this is defining the scope that we want to give the permission aspect to. So it's supposed to be https://analysis.windows.net, Power BI, API, and then we're giving it the default scope. Also need your redirect URI. Additionally, it's going to return some stuff back to us, and we need to store it somewhere in case you want to rerun that script and not go through the authentication process again. Then what it's going to do first is try to read this file. If it finds the information it needs to run successfully, guess what? It will go through that, and then it won't prompt you to log back in. Now, something I got great feedback on with one of my libraries was the TD Ameritrade. So I actually changed some of my credential process. I will be integrating that into this library. It's not currently there, but really, in essence, what I'm doing is I'm treating my credentials as a traditional Python object. And so what you're going to be able to do is specify whether you want to save it, whether you don't want to save it, if you want to manually pass through things, if you want to just have it prompt you every single time. So I'm trying to give it more flexibility to people who want to use it in different scenarios. So that way it's not just forcing you down one path that might not be best for you. So got great feedback on that one. So thank you again for those of you who helped contribute there. I think that definitely made it even a much better process. I love it. Okay, so let's run it now and go through the authentication process. Okay, perfect. So you're going to see this little URL, and it's going to be saying, hey, you need to go here and authorize. So all you do is just hover and then do control click. You're going to be opening up a new window. You're going to see the name of your application that you registered. It's going to say it's unverified. That's because we haven't verified it. It should match. Please make sure it matches and it's not some other application. But you're going to also see what they're requesting access to. So you can see they want to view all my data sets. They want to read and write all my data sets. So it's just letting you know kind of what permissions are being requested. And then I just say consent on behalf of your organization. And then I do accept. Do not close the window. You're going to be redirected. So now we are at our redirect URL. You can get this massive code. So you need to do Control A, Control C, copy it all, put it back into the terminal, and then press enter. I forgot to do the S at the end. See, this is what I talk about. Alex does this all the time. All the time. He makes one little thing and then he misspells it. That time we didn't have to go through the entire process because we basically already said, hey, I just want permission. Now you're going to see this Power BI state file, and inside of it, you are going to see all of the information. So your access token, your refresh token, your ID token, your client info, all sorts of stuff, even your other stuff as well. So lots of good stuff in there. Do not delete that file unless you want to go through the entire process again. Sometimes that does happen if you've changed permissions and all sorts of different stuff. So sometimes you might have to go through that process again, especially if you're seeing things like, hey, you don't have permission for this. more than likely you're going to have to delete that file, go through the process, request that new permission, and then you'll be good to go. But with that being said, that does complete our first video. So if you have any questions about setting up and registering a Power BI application or going through the authentication process, feel free to put those down in the comments below. In our next video, we'll start talking about some of the Power BI resource objects. So things like dashboards, things like, reports, all sorts of different stuff. So lots of good stuff coming up in this series. So thanks again for watching, everybody. We'll see you in video number 2.